afternoon and welcome to AP on Play. I am your host, Anjali Prasad. Our guest today is newly elected Tricia Dare from the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. She just succeeded in the November 5th election. She's going to be a circuit court judge, Oakland County, in January. Tricia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations on the election.
Thank you.
I know all about you, but let's tell our audience a little bit about you.
Okay, so I have been a prosecutor. I've been an attorney since 1997. I went straight out of law school. I went to the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office. That's where I spent my entire career, 27 years, at the Prosecutor's Office. I've done a lot at the Prosecutor's Office, but my main focus at the Prosecutor's Office was special victims. Currently chief of the Special Victims Unit, and that's a position I've held since 2010. So just so you're aware, the Special Victims covers cases involving domestic violence, sexual assault, child sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, and we recently added hate crimes to that division.
Okay.
I'm also very active in supervising and mentoring young prosecutors that come through our office, which is something I really enjoy. I've had the experience of trying a lot of cases, a lot of major cases that have gone through Oakland County. I think I've done 14 homicides in my 27 years. But primarily just special victim cases,
right,
and a lot of community involvement.
You and I are similar in that we both graduated law school and our first jobs were at major district attorney's offices. I was a DA in Philadelphia, and you were a DA or a prosecutor in Oakland County. And the way we started was they just would throw the baby DAs into the courtroom doing preliminary hearings. And we would do maybe 50 to 60 preliminary hearings a day. And it was, the volume was crushing. So tell us about training at the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office.
It's a little different at Oakland County. That sounds a little more like Wayne County.
Oh, okay, possibly. Yes.
The volume.
The volume.
We do have volume, but not to the extent that the office that you were in probably does. We would start out in our when I started. It's a little different now, but we would start out in our warrants division. So you would learn how to build a case, how to review a case to see if charges should be issued, how to read a police report. We'd spend approximately, I think I spent 3 months in our warrants division. And then they sent us to the district court where we did preliminary examinations, pre-trials, and traffic.
Yes. And how many prelims were you doing a day?
You know, we didn't have, now we have the probable cause conferences, which eliminates a lot of the preliminary examinations. But back when I was in district court, we didn't have those. So I was assigned, my two main courses I was assigned to Troy and I was assigned to Pontiac. Mm-hmm. Now Troy, I would say on average it was probably, there would probably be 10 scheduled and we might hold 3.
Okay.
In Pontiac, there would be about 20 to 25 exams scheduled in a day and we would conduct as many as we could. It would probably be 10.
Okay. So
it was a lot.
It was a lot, but not as much as
no.
In Philadelphia. It was, and we were splitting lists. So there might be 100 prelims scheduled on a given day, and we'd split a list. So I would take 50, and my trial partner would take 50, and that is how I learned for 1 year. All I was doing was prelims. Wow. Day after day after day, and I don't know, I guess the theory was sheer volume makes you a better attorney. Well, it certainly makes you think on your feet quicker.
It does. Yes, it does. And you learn the rules of evidence.
Yes, yes. So you started in the warrants unit, and then where did you go through the office?
So I went from the warrants division for approximately 3 months, and then I went to the district court division for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I went from there. We used to have a domestic violence unit.
Yes.
And in total, I was in the domestic violence unit for about 10 years when it was the domestic violence unit. I did take a break after I had my first child and I was pregnant with my second child. I did go down to the warrants division and work in that division for a year.
Right.
And then I came back to the domestic violence unit. And then in 2010, I did a circuit court, just a general docket.
Yeah.
I was in front of Judge Sosnick, who's no longer with us.
Oh, right.
Bless his heart. And then I was there about a year, and then I was asked to head up the Special Victims Unit, which was a newly created unit, which combined a number of different special units in our office into one division.
Right.
There's 10 attorneys there. I think there's still 10 attorneys there. So the number hasn't changed. So I've been doing that since 2010. There was a stint in there where I was also chief of our juvenile justice division. So I was doing both at one point in time.
Yes, yes.
And I did that for approximately 6 years where I was doing double duty. That was
I also did a stint in the Juvenile Justice Division of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. And what I liked about that unit is that the emphasis was on rehabilitation as opposed to punishment.
Yes.
Is that same in Oakland County?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's getting the kids back on track.
Yes.
And with the kids, so in our juvenile justice division, we do the delinquency cases, which is I think what you're talking about.
Right.
But we also did the abuse and neglect cases.
Okay, yes, I'm talking about the delinquency.
Okay.
So let's just explain to the audience what the juvenile, if you're charged with a crime and you're under, is it age 19?
18.
Oh, it's 18. So if you're under
18 or under.
if you're 18 and under, then the Oakland County Juvenile Justice Division will charge you, correct?
Correct.
And what is delinquency and what does that mean?
The delinquency is different. You don't ultimately end up with a criminal conviction on your record.
Right.
It's called an adjudication.
Yes.
The goal is to get the child on track, to get them the services that they need to be able to be successful in
Yes.
life. And that's the goal.
Yes.
But the prosecutions, they look similar. But it's more what happens in the end that's very different.
Right. So, for example, you might have a substance abuse problem, or you might be experiencing a host of problems as a juvenile. And what I think happens in your office is there's basically evaluations to kind of get at the root of the problem.
Yes.
And then you'll be put in a program to hopefully get you back on track.
Right. A lot of services,
Yes.
and in the juvenile justice division now, we do have a treatment court, which
Yes.
are really wonderful.
Which is really good.
To address mental health issues and also address substance abuse issues.
Yes, and if you are detained during the course of your case, what's the name of the facility the juveniles are at?
It's Children's Village.
Okay, it's Children's Village, yes, which I've had several clients there over the years, and it's, well, what do you think of Children's Village?
There's different levels.
Yes.
There's high security.
Yes.
Which is similar to a jail setting, but it's child friendly.
Yes.
But it's secure, definitely
Yeah.
secure. And then you have the cottages, where there's more independent living.
I don't know about the cottages.
They're little outbuildings.
Okay.
Where the children live almost like as a family. They have
Okay.
other kids that they live with that they're not high security risk, but they need that structure.
Yes, okay.
And so they do that. They go to school everybody goes to school on the Children's Village campus. Some of them go to school in the school district, the local school district. So there's different levels.
Right, okay. And it sounds like your sweet spot, like mine, when I was a prosecutor, is domestic violence.
Yes,
And that's the Special Victims Unit.
Yes.
So tell us about that practice. I know firsthand it's so exhausting and so difficult.
It is, and it's something when I started doing, I thought there's no way I could do this for long.
I know, same.
And you realize, and it's not, I don't want to say it's a lot of cases where you make a big difference, but there are those cases where you feel as if you saved someone's life. You kept someone in a safe place. You helped them get out of a dangerous situation, and it really, it's what motivates you, and you understand this because you did it. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning, and it makes you stay up till midnight working on that case just to make sure you do everything you can do to protect those people.
Right.
And so I started out doing just simple assault cases, and by the end I was doing some homicide cases, which were really, really difficult cases to do. But at the same time, you have, when innocent people have things happen to them, it's different than when people who are involved in maybe criminal activity have
Much
something happen
different,
to them.
yes, yes. And you and I were talking off camera about the resources that are available in Oakland County or in Michigan, actually, for victims of domestic violence. So why don't we share with the audience some of the resources that are available?
Well, there's the biggest resource, and the one that I'm very involved in, a huge advocate, is Haven, which is Oakland County's. It's not just a domestic violence shelter, which people think,
Right.
but it is an amazing shelter. It's a center. They have counseling. They have things for children there. You can take, if you're staying in shelter, you can bring your animal with you, which is a huge thing.
Yeah.
People don't want to go into shelter care because they can't bring their dog with them.
Yes.
Which is important to them during this time. They have, support groups. They will help women get jobs. They will help them get housing. They will help with legal services. There's just,
Do they have trained counselors on site?
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
they'll counsel you
Yep.
and okay.
They have court advocates. So if you're going to court, they'll have someone who will go with you to court. That's not necessarily an advocate from the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
It's someone that's just neutral and just there for the victim. So that's a really great facility. In terms of, I also do child sexual assaults and child abuse cases, and Care House is another one that I'm very involved in.
Yes.
And that's what they handle. They do the preventative side. So they go in and educate in the community, but they also do the other side of it, where they do the forensic interviewing
Right.
for
Yeah.
law enforcement, so they can interview children who have been maybe victims of a domestic violence situation or abuse, but they can interview them in a neutral setting, a comfortable setting where police officers, prosecutors can actually observe the interview. And the purpose of that is so that the child doesn't have to be interviewed over and over again. They can just
Right.
be interviewed one time, which is really great. But they also provide counseling and services, and both of those are just really amazing services.
Did I see somewhere that you maybe were on a state committee or are on a state committee having to do with sexual assault or sexual abuse?
Yes.
What am I talking about? I read something on your bio.
So the Oakland County Sexual Assault Response Team.
Okay, what is this?
It was active
Okay.
a few years ago, and it's a collaboration of a number of different community members. There's Havens on it, Care Houses on it, law enforcement's on it. There's clergy on it. There's just a collaboration of the community who gets together to figure out how we can prevent and respond to sexual assault within the community.
Okay.
It did take a hiatus for a little bit just to regroup and refocus and decide what the mission of the group was, and they just started back up.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that.
Yes. Are you going to stay on once you change jobs?
I'm hoping
Are you
to. I'm
allowed
hoping
to, I hope?
Yeah. As long as we don't talk about cases, I should be able to do those things.
Yes. Okay, so shifting gears, let's talk about why did you want to run for judge?
So I wanted to run for judge. I honestly didn't. If you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I would have told you I wasn't going to run for judge because
Yeah.
I enjoyed what I do. I wanted to stay there. But I got to a point where I feel like I just can do more. You see a lot of things happening, and you've done both sides.
Yes.
So you know.
Yeah.
You see what happens in the court, and there's often times as a prosecutor that you want to be able to help the other side. You want to be able to, you may see something happening in the courtroom. Maybe it's a sentence. Maybe it's something that happens where you may have a better idea of what could happen.
Right.
So I feel like I've spent my entire career working with victims.
Yes.
Primarily. And it's been a good career, and I just feel like I can do more. I feel like there's kids that come in. It's a family court seat. So
Oh, okay, right.
people come to family court, and it's typically not for the fun things like adoptions and weddings. It's typically for things like allegations of abuse or neglect, or a divorce or custody, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Personal protection orders. But I just feel like I have the skills and the experience and the temperament and the compassion to be a judge in those situations and make people feel comfortable, make people feel like they have a voice in the courtroom, because that's, as a prosecutor, especially with special victims, that's what you're always making sure that the voice is heard in the courtroom.
Yes.
And I think as a judge, I can reach more, bottom line, I can reach more people.
Yeah, and you have you have the perspective of, you'll know what's happening in the courtroom and what needs to happen, I guess. Is if something's not happening, because of your perspective, you'll be able to get in there and say, well, what about this? What about that? Because you've been in the courtroom for 27 years,
Right,
so
right.
you know kind of what's going to happen, how a case should be advocated, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, and one of the nice things is I've been in front of every judge in Oakland County.
Yes.
I've been in every court, and so you take a little bit away from everyone that you're in front of.
Yes.
It's mostly good, but there are some negative things, but mostly good. And there's things that judges do that I can say, oh my gosh, I want to do that in my courtroom.
Yes.
I love how this judge does that. So it's nice to have that.
What about a practice that you don't think is a good idea in the courtroom for a judge? And I'm not going to ask you to name, but I've been in front of a lot of judges too, and I also can tell you what I think is great and what I think is terrible. And I'm going to say it. I think it's terrible to be for an attorney to be scolded by the judge.
I do too.
And yes.
And I think
You can
attorneys.
scold me. You can take me back to chambers and scold me, but please, I don't need to be scolded in front of the client.
And I've actually heard that a lot, and I actually have seen more of the positive, where you and I may be trying a case against each other, and maybe you prevail,
Right.
But I tried a good case,
Yeah.
And a judge will say in front of the client, you know what, your attorney did a great job for you.
Yes.
And it takes literally less than 30 seconds.
It goes
to
a
do
long
that,
way.
because attorneys, they come to court and they do work hard.
Yes.
And they don't always get the results.
Yes.
And so I just think, just a positive can go a long way.
Especially, I'm a criminal defense attorney now, as you know, especially I think the criminal defense attorneys really do appreciate that acknowledgement from the court, because we have an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're in a hole to begin with, and we're climbing out as best we can, and the client doesn't always see it that way. So it's nice to get the reinforcement from a judge.
Right, because sometimes you have cases that, they're almost, they're very difficult cases.
They're very difficult cases.
So just because you may not prevail in court, it doesn't mean it's because of you.
Yes.
And I think it's important that your clients see that.
Yeah.
And judges can play a role in that.
My son asked me this question this morning, so because he knew I was interviewing you. He said, "How is she going to know how to be a judge? Will she have a mentor?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me ask her."
Well, the nice thing is, when I ran, it was so humbling to me to have the support from the bench that I had.
Yes.
I had so many judges, and those judges have all reached out to me, whatever we can do to help. But I do have a couple specific ones.
Okay.
So Judge Gorska, I don't know if you know Judge Gorska.
I do.
Okay.
I love being in her courtroom. She was one of the, I didn't want to say it, but she's one of the courtrooms that sometimes I'll just sit and observe, and I'll be like, wow, she is amazing.
Well, she cares. She cares
Yes.
so much. So she was, when I was in the domestic violence unit for almost 10 years,
Yeah.
she was my supervisor. And she just took me under her wing. She mentored me as a prosecutor. She encouraged me to run for judge.
Yes.
And she has been super supportive, and I've been going to watch her, but also other judges.
She's fun to watch.
Yes, because every judge has their own style, and I think when you go and watch the judges, you can take a little bit away from each of them.
Yes.
And they've all been wonderful. Come and watch, whatever questions you have. I have Judge Saban. She's my neighbor in the courthouse. She's a family court judge.
I don't think I know Judge
And
Saban.
she's very intelligent.
Okay.
She's a very good judge. And she has offered, you're my neighbor. If you need help, I'm right next door.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have that support from the bench.
Right. And are you going to assemble a staff, like a law clerk, a case manager, things like that?
So I have a secretary. I took someone from the prosecutor's office that I've worked with since. She's been there 25 years, and she's started when she was 17. And I've worked with her for a long time, and she's going to do great. And then I have my staff attorney.
Okay. Somebody who's worked there? Somebody who you inherit, or?
I didn't inherit.
Okay.
So Judge McDonald, Julie McDonald.
Yes.
Okay, so she had a clerk. Mm-hmm. Her name was Molly Knappenberger, and she recently passed the bar, but she was clerking in the family court division for many years leading up to passing the bar, and she wanted to stay. And so many judges, not just Judge McDonald, were like, she's going to be fabulous. So I've spent some time with her, gotten to know her, and she's going to be my staff attorney.
And the staff attorneys that are assigned to the family law judges are very, very smart.
Yes.
I've dealt with many of them.
And they're very important.
Yeah. Oh, they're so
Very important.
Yeah.
And then I've been interviewing for clerks.
Okay, good.
I have I have 2 clerks, so I haven't made the decision on that, but I will by Wednesday because we're getting down to the wire now.
Yes, when do you start?
I start on January 2nd.
But you're still working at the prosecutor's office.
Yes, I used pretty much all my vacation time before the election, so I'm still working, but I have a lot to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm sure.
A lot to wrap up.
Yes. Tell us about the election. What was it? How was it running? I didn't like I ran many years ago for a lower position than you ran for, and I hated it. It was stressful and mean-spirited.
Try to stay. It was definitely. I'm not political at all.
Same.
And I really tried to stay nonpartisan, and it seemed as if it was almost impossible. And there was a lot of pressure to affiliate with a party, and I stayed out of that. And that was really difficult because I'm running for judge. Judges should not affiliate with a party.
I completely agree.
That I think was the most challenging thing I had. There was it was exhausting, but it was also one of the things. It took me out of my comfort zone. I was doing things I would not normally do.
Did you knock on doors?
I didn't, because when you run, Oakland County's 1.3 million people.
Oh, right. Yes.
So I did not do that.
Yes.
But what we would do is we would go wherever there were large groups of people.
Okay.
Whether it was a festival or some event.
Yeah.
We would go, and that's how we would talk to people. I had a lot of support out there. I had a lot of people, but I was just getting out and meeting people, getting the word out. It was a lot, though. I'm chatty this morning. I think I've had a lot of coffee.
Well, we have a lot in common. It's nice.
I tend to be a little more quieter.
Yeah.
And not someone who likes to be the center of attention.
Right.
So that was a little tricky for me.
Yes.
And it's interesting. You can probably relate to this when you ran, is people will say, but you're an attorney, you're a prosecutor, you stand up in front of people all the time and you talk. And I'm like, but I'm never talking about myself.
I know.
I'm telling someone else's story.
Yeah.
So that was tricky for me.
Yeah. And I've found that there's 2 types of trial attorneys. The trial attorneys who like to be the show in the courtroom, and the trial attorneys who just deliver the message.
Yes.
So, and both styles work. You just have to figure out where you fit in. But I totally get it. You stand up in court and you're not talking about yourself.
Right.
You're talking about your case. It's very different when all of a sudden you have to, put yourself out there.
So that was challenging for me.
Yeah.
Because there's a borderline, there's a fine line between you want people to know about you, but you don't want to be boastful.
No.
So it's a really fine line.
And your experience really does speak for itself. I mean, you've been through probably every unit in the prosecutor's office. So, just from an experience perspective, you're obviously going to be very competent.
Thank you.
What else can we talk about? We have maybe 1 more minute, 2 more minutes.
I'll talk. One thing I can address that people usually ask me is, so I've been a prosecutor. I'm married to law enforcement.
Oh, yes.
But so people are like, how can you be unbiased?
Yes.
And so,
I wanted to ask the question, but
No,
you're my guest, so I didn't want to put you in the hot
it's
seat.
okay.
But
So one of the things that I was really proud about in my campaign was that I had so much support from defense attorneys.
Oh,
So people on the other side.
Okay.
I also was a prosecutor who, during my time, may have tried more cases against police officers. So I feel as if I can absolutely be fair and unbiased, and the support from the defense really, I was very proud of that, because it means like I'm reasonable, I'm fair.
It goes a long way.
And,
yes.
I think the other side sees that.
Yeah.
So
that's
I feel
actually.
comfortable
I'm
with
glad
that.
you mentioned that, because another thing my son asked me this morning when we were talking about you is, do you think she can be fair to you because she's a career prosecutor? I said, I don't know. I'll ask her.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as a prosecutor, and you know this,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily getting the conviction.
Right.
It's doing what's right.
Yes.
And if you're doing what's right, then you're going to be fair. And you're going to be unbiased.
And I think the more experience you have there, the more you want to do what's right.
Yes.
I don't know if the young prosecutors, and I'm not just talking about your office, but I'm talking about downtown at the U.S.
There's a
Attorney's
growth.
office.
There definitely is a growth.
Yeah. Sometimes I just wonder if the younger, just prosecutors in general, just want to prosecute. But I think as we age and we see the cases, our perspective becomes more reasonable, and we start to think, well, what's fair here? What happened and what's fair?
I think a lot of it for a prosecutor is you want to prevent future crimes. And how do you do that?
Yeah.
You try to fix the problem, and fixing the problem doesn't always mean like going full force on
Right,
cases,
right.
depending on the cases.
No, I remember being a young prosecutor and living in fear of me making a decision that would result in another crime occurring.
Yes, yes.
And so possibly we overcompensate
Right.
for that.
And I think over time,
Yeah.
I think growth
Yes.
as prosecutors, but I also think over time, society has begun to see that.
Yes, yes. Well, Judge Dare, I'm so happy you came on this morning. We'll be tracking your
thank
your
you.
career with great interest, and I look forward to seeing you in the courtroom.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. This was wonderful. I'm happy to come back anytime.
You're welcome. And audience, thank you for tuning in to AP on Play. We'll see you next time.